Okay, so we're starting back. We're going to talk about tall tales first. So, everybody knows what a fairy tale is. Pretty much every culture has them. Or every culture actually does have them. So, some of the most famous ones are the Grimm fairy tales, which are European fairy tales. I'm sure y'all can think of a couple from your own country, maybe even a couple of American ones, or European ones rather. For example, Cinderella, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Beauty and the Beast. Well, tall tales are basically American fairy tales. Tall tales are only found in America. They're a particular product of America. Oftentimes, what makes them so American is oftentimes they're about America's westward expansion. So they have a lot to do with like lumberjacks, people that cut down trees for to build stuff or to make paper, and then like cowboys or cowpokes, as you read about in Pecos Bill. So along with that, tall tales are actually oral traditions. They're meant to be told, not read. Now, when they were written down, they were written the way they were spoken. So, a lot of the spelling in them, they're spelled the way they sound. For example, jest for just, because it sounds like we're saying jest instead of just. Okay. Now, with the birth of Pecos Bill, your vocabulary list for this story, keep up with it. Put it somewhere so you will have it with you Tuesday morning. I'm going to take it up on Tuesday. Now we're going to learn how to make a quadrant. You need to take a piece of notebook paper and fold it into 4 squares. You need to label the squares. Clarifying. Clarifying is just basically clearing up any misunderstandings in the story. Whatever you misunderstood about the story, you need to write it down in clarifying, and we can clear it up, and you can write notes on it. Another square needs to be labeled questioning. What questions do you still have about this story? And kind of think about, was there something you didn't quite understand that made you question, or was there something kind of unbelievable that you have to question? Just remember, with the birth of Pecos Bill, it is a tall tale, and an unbelievable element. Unbelievability is actually an element of tall tales. Okay, so your next square will be labeled predicting. This is what you think will happen in the story. And then finally, your final square will be summarizing. You need to summarize what you read. And we're going to talk about each one of these individually. The first one we're going to talk about is predicting. Read the title, The Birth of Pecos Bill. What do you predict the story will be about? Now, going along with this, I just want to back up for a moment and remind you, this is a video. You can pause it, write stuff down, or come back to it. Just as long as you're making your quadrant and doing each of these steps, that'll be fine. So you could have paused it right now, wrote down what you predict will happen in this story, and then we'll move on. Or if you need time to read, for example, our next point, read the first 2 paragraphs, pause the video, read the 2 paragraphs. What do you predict will happen? Pause the video, write that down. Okay, so I'm going down to our 3rd point now. Read the next 2 paragraphs. What do you predict will happen? Alright, now that you've read and written that, we're going to the last mark. Read the rest of the story. Were any of your predictions correct? Alright, great job. Now we're going to clarifying. What is something you need to have clarified about this story? What didn't you understand in the story? Is there anything you could clarify for another student? If there is anything you could clarify for another student, mark it, because you may be asked to clarify it with the class. Alright, our next point is questioning. What questions do you have about this story? Is there anything you question in the story? So, I want to explain these. The first one, what questions do you have about the story, can be more about history. What's the history of the story? What is the location of the story? For example, where is the Pecos River? And the second one, excuse me, is there anything you question in the story? Has more to do with morals. For example, you could question, how was Pecos Bill raised by coyotes? How did he learn to talk? Okay, so our next section is summarizing. Think of summarizing as you want to tell a friend about this story. What are you going to tell him or her? You're not going to tell them the whole story. You're going to summarize what the story is about and tell them. This is something that's actually fairly important when we read stuff, is to know how to summarize it. I believe there may be some questions on like the IELTS and TOEFL tests that kind of ask the same sort of question as how was what you read summarized? How would you summarize it? Now with the birth of Pecos Bill, there's 3 points in the story that actually summarizes it. What's the first one? Alright, the first one is that Pecos Bill fell out of the family wagon and was raised by coyotes. So we could say Pecos Bill fell out of the family, Pecos Bill fell into the Pecos River and was then raised by coyotes. Or simply, Pecos Bill was raised by coyotes from after he fell in a river and almost drowned. What do you think the next point is? Alright, the next point is Pecos Bill's brother found him. And Pecos Bill, he went out west with him, Pecos Bill's brother. So, remember in the story, Pecos Bill's brother finds him and convinces him he's not a coyote. So Pecos Bill agrees that, yeah, I'll go west with you and be a cowboy. What do you think the final point is? The final point is that Pecos Bill actually did become a cowboy or cowpoke and invented the lasso and branding iron. Remember, it's like the last paragraph, it was talking about how Pecos Bill had actually become a fairly good cowboy. and then he had invented stuff to help in the trade or the job of being a cowboy. Okay. Now for homework, you need to study for your quiz. Study, study, study. I want everybody to do fantastic on this quiz, and I'm sure everybody will. I also want you to read John Henry, The Still Driving Man. Now, in the packet of short stories I gave you, that is the very last story. For that story, I want you to make a vocabulary list, and I want you to try to make a quadrant in the exact same way I showed you on here. If you are not quite sure, at least try. We'll talk about it Tuesday. But you do need to make a vocabulary list, because I will take that up Tuesday, and that will be counted as homework. Now, if you have any questions over your quiz or anything, email me. I'm here to help you. I want everybody to do good. So email me if you have any questions. Alright, I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. I will see everybody Tuesday.